This happened in October 2009. I was 23, fresh out of college, and thought I knew everything about backpacking. I'd done dozens of day hikes, a few overnight trips, nothing too crazy. When my buddy Marcus suggested we tackle a section of the Appalachian Trail in West Virginia that was off the beaten path, I jumped at the chance. The plan was simple: 3 days, 2 nights, starting at a trailhead near a place called Blackwater Hollow. Marcus had found it on some obscure hiking forum, supposedly incredible views, hardly any foot traffic, like stepping back in time. The fact that it wasn't on any official trail maps should have been our first red flag. We started the hike on a Friday afternoon. The weather was perfect, crisp autumn air, leaves just starting to turn. For the first few hours, everything was normal. The trail was well marked, if a bit overgrown. We saw the usual wildlife, a few deer, some squirrels, heard woodpeckers in the distance. But as we got deeper into the mountains, things started feeling off. First, it was the silence. Not peaceful quiet, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. No birds. No insects. Even our footsteps seemed muffled, like the forest was swallowing every sound. Marcus joked that we'd entered a dead zone, but neither of us was really laughing. Then we found the trees. About 2 miles in, we came across a grove of dead oaks. Not unusual by itself, disease, drought, whatever. But these trees were arranged in a perfect circle, maybe 30 feet across. All of them were the same height, all dead for what looked like years, but still standing. Their branches were twisted into these impossible spirals, like someone had grabbed them and wrung them out while they were still growing. In the center of the circle was a stone cairn about 4 feet high. Not the usual trail marker kind, this was made of flat stone stacked with mathematical precision. Each stone was covered in what looked like scratch marks, deep gouges that definitely weren't natural weathering. Marcus wanted to take pictures, but his camera malfunctioned. My phone had no signal, expected, but the battery was draining impossibly fast despite being at 80% when we started. We decided to keep moving. That's when we heard it for the first time. It started as a low humming, almost subsonic. The kind of sound you feel in your chest more than hear with your ears. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, the trees, the ground, the air itself. We stood there for maybe 5 minutes, trying to figure out what it was. Then it stopped, as suddenly as it had begun. Probably just whined through the rocks, Marcus said, but his voice was shaky. We hiked for another hour before setting up camp near a small creek. The sun was setting, and we wanted to get our tent up before dark. That's when we noticed our shadows. In the fading light, our shadows were wrong. They moved a split second before we did, like they were leading instead of following. And they were too long, stretching impossibly far across the ground even when we stood directly under our flashlights. But the really f***ed up part was, sometimes there were 3 shadows when there should have been 2. We set up camp quickly, barely speaking. Made a small fire, ate some trail mix, tried to pretend everything was normal. The humming started again after full dark, louder this time. It would build to this crescendo, then cut off abruptly, leaving that horrible ringing silence. Around midnight, Marcus shook me awake. "Listen," he whispered. At first, I didn't hear anything. Then I realized, that was the point. The humming had stopped, but now there was something else. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, circling our camp. But the ground was covered in dry leaves, and whoever was walking wasn't making any sound at all. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent flap. The beam swept across empty forest, but I could swear I saw movement at the edge of the light. Something tall and thin, sliding between the trees just outside my vision. "There's nothing there," I told Marcus, but my hands were shaking. "Look at the fire," he said. Our campfire had gone out, but the embers were still glowing. Except they weren't red-orange like they should be. They were pale blue, almost white, and they were pulsing in a steady rhythm. Like a heartbeat. That's when we saw the eyes. Just beyond the dying light of our fire, maybe 20 feet away, 2 points of light were watching us. They were too high off the ground to be a deer or bear, maybe 7 feet up. And they weren't reflecting our firelight, they were glowing on their own, the same pale blue as the embers. We sat there frozen for what felt like hours, staring back at those eyes. They never blinked. Never moved. Just watched. When dawn finally came, they were gone. We should have packed up and hiked out immediately. But Marcus was convinced we'd just spooked ourselves, that there was a logical explanation for everything. Maybe it was an owl, he said. Or light reflecting off spider webs. Yeah, right. We hiked deeper into the mountains that morning, following what remained of the trail. The forest was different in daylight, older somehow, like we'd walked backwards in time. The trees were massive, with bark that looked almost black. Spanish moss hung from branches in twisted curtains, even though we were way too far north for Spanish moss. And there were more cairns. Dozens of them, scattered through the forest like some kind of markers. All made from the same flat stones, all covered in those deep scratch marks. Some were small, maybe a foot high. Others towered above us, 8 or 9 feet tall, balanced in ways that seemed to defy physics. Then Marcus saw something. He called me over to a clearing where someone had arranged animal bones in intricate patterns on the ground. Skulls, ribs, leg bones, all bleached white and positioned with the same mathematical precision as the stone cairns. But these weren't random animal remains. Someone had collected them, cleaned them, arranged them deliberately. The patterns hurt to look at. I'm not kidding, staring at them for more than a few seconds gave me a splitting headache and made my vision blur. It was like they were designed to be incomprehensible to human eyes. We need to leave, I said. Right now. But when we turned around, the trail was gone. I don't mean we lost the trail. I mean it was literally gone. Where there had been a clear path through the underbrush just minutes before, there was now dense forest stretching in every direction. No broken branches to mark our passage. No disturbed leaves. Nothing. We spent the rest of the day trying to find our way back, using my compass and the position of the sun. But every direction we walked seemed to lead us deeper into the same impossible forest. The trees grew thicker, the shadows darker. And those cairns were everywhere now, watching us like silent sentinels. As the second night fell, we made camp in a small clearing, backs to back, taking turns sleeping. The humming started again, but this time it was different. Rhythmic. Almost like chanting, but in no language I'd ever heard. It seemed to come from the ground itself, vibrating up through our sleeping bags. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to find Marcus standing at the edge of our camp, perfectly still. His back was to me, and he was facing the dark forest. Marcus? I whispered. He didn't respond. Didn't even seem to be breathing. I got up and walked over to him, flashlight in hand. When I got close enough to see his face, my blood went cold. His eyes were open, but they were rolled back, showing only white. And his mouth was moving, forming words I couldn't hear. I grabbed his shoulder and shook him. He collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. When he came to a few minutes later, he had no memory of getting up. Said he'd been having the most vivid dream, something about being called deeper into the forest, about finding a place where the rules were different. There's something in these mountains, he said, and his voice was barely a whisper. Something old. Something that doesn't want us to leave. The third day was when things got really bad. We woke up to find our campsite surrounded by those bone patterns. They hadn't been there the night before, I was sure of it. But now they formed concentric circles around our tent, like some kind of ritual diagram. And in the center, right where we'd been sleeping, someone had placed a single human skull. The skull was old, yellowed with age, but it wasn't empty. Something was moving inside it. Something small and dark that skittered when I got too close. That's when I noticed the smell. Sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in water. But underneath it was something else, the metallic scent of old blood, and something else I couldn't identify. Something wrong. We packed up in complete panic, throwing everything into our backpacks without caring about organization. We had to get out of there. Had to find the trail, find civilization, find other people who could confirm we weren't losing our minds. But as we stumbled through the forest, the landscape began to change in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Hills appeared where there had been valleys. Streams flowed uphill. Trees grew in perfect geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. And we kept finding more evidence of someone. Or something. Pieces of clothing hanging from branches, old, faded, but recent enough that they hadn't completely rotted away. A child's sneaker, too small and too clean to have been there long. A woman's purse, contents scattered, with a driver's license dated just 2 years earlier. We weren't the first people to get lost in these mountains. And from the look of things, most of them never found their way out. That's when we heard the voices. They started as whispers at first, just at the edge of hearing. But as the day wore on, they got clearer. Familiar voices, calling our names. Marcus heard his girlfriend Sarah, calling for help from somewhere in the forest. I heard my mom, sounding scared, asking why I'd left her alone. We knew it wasn't real. Knew it couldn't be real. But the voices were so perfect, so exactly like the people we loved, that we found ourselves walking toward them despite every rational thought screaming at us to stop. I almost followed my mom's voice into a ravine that had no visible bottom. Marcus caught my arm just as I was about to step over the edge. "It's not her," he said, but his own voice was breaking. "It's not really her." Then, the thing showed itself. We were sitting in another clearing, backs to back again, when the temperature dropped about 20 degrees in the span of seconds. Our breath started misting, and frost began forming on the leaves around us despite it being a warm October day. The humming started again, but this time it was coming from directly above us. I looked up and saw it hanging from the trees. I still can't adequately describe what we saw. It was like someone had taken a person and stretched them impossibly long, then hung them upside down from the branches like a piece of meat. Its limbs were elongated, twisted, jointed in places where joints shouldn't be. Its face was human enough to be recognizable but wrong enough to be utterly terrifying, features in the right places but stretched and distorted like a funhouse mirror. But the worst part was its eyes. They were the same pale blue we'd seen the first night, but they were human eyes. Aware. Intelligent. And completely, utterly insane. It dropped from the trees with a sound like breaking bones, landing about 10 feet in front of us. When it moved, it didn't walk, it flowed, like liquid given form. And it was trying to speak, its mouth working soundlessly, forming words in that same unknown language we'd heard in the humming. Then its mouth stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of teeth that looked like they'd been filed to points. And it began to laugh, a sound like wind through dead leaves, like children crying, like every nightmare you've ever had given voice. We started running. I don't remember much about the next few hours. We crashed through the forest like animals, branches tearing at our clothes and skin, that thing's laughter echoing behind us. Every time I looked back, it was there, following at the same distance, never gaining but never falling behind. Somehow, impossibly, we found the trail again. Or maybe it found us. One minute we were fighting through dense underbrush, the next we were standing on the clear path we'd lost 2 days earlier. Behind us, the forest had gone completely silent again. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. We drove straight through the night, not speaking, not stopping except for gas. When we finally got back to civilization, we tried to report what we'd seen to park rangers, to local police, to anyone who would listen. But there was no record of any trail near Blackwater Hollow. No official camping areas. No missing hikers matching the IDs we'd found. According to every map, every GPS system, every official record, the place we've been didn't exist. Marcus and I drifted apart after that. We tried to stay in touch, but every conversation eventually came back to those 3 days, and neither of us wanted to relive them. Last I heard, he'd moved to California and wouldn't go camping anymore. I've spent the last 15 years trying to convince myself it was all some kind of shared hallucination. If you're ever hiking and find yourself on an unmarked trail that feels wrong, trust your instincts. Some places in this world aren't meant for people. Some things are better left undisturbed. I just hope others learn from my experience and stay safe. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to hit that like button, it really helps us out. We'd love to hear what you think, so drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a new upload.